In the industrial heart of 1886, London, two widowed strangers, both in their 60s, rise from utter poverty to amass a fortune and a reputation for ruthless cunning that terrifies the city. Their journey weaves through betrayal, long-buried secrets, and acts so audacious no one believes they could have pulled them off. But behind every calculated move lies a searing vendetta and a revelation that will leave London gasping.
Chapter 1. The Ashes of Yesterday. The rain fell like a curtain of ice over the streets of Whitechapel, turning cobblestones into mirrors reflecting the gas lamp's dim, wavering glow. Margaret Kinsley huddled beneath the ragged hood of her coat, her bones aching in ways they hadn't in decades, and the bitter wind whispered a cruel taunt. "Nothing awaits you now." She had been 60 last month, widowed, penniless, and every opportunity long vanished, leaving only the shadows of loss. Across the street, Henry Fallow, a man of similar age and equally barren fortune, adjusted his bowler hat and flicked a coin into the gutter. He, too, had been forgotten by the world. London had no patience for the old or broken. Factories churned smoke like angry beasts, streets teemed with children begging for bread, and the poor were invisible, mere phantoms in the eyes of the wealthy. Yet, in this despair, Margaret and Henry sensed an unspoken kinship. Their paths crossed in the dimly lit corridor of the charity soup kitchen, where they had both arrived at the same moment, their eyes locking with the recognition of two survivors who had endured life's cruelties. 52 penn'orth of gruel today, the matron announced, handing Margaret a metal bowl. Her fingers trembled, but she held her chin high. Henry's gaze swept the room, noting every detail, the broken window pane, the hushed whispers of men who had been robbed of dignity, the faint smell of mildew masking despair. It was then that he noticed her. Margaret, gaunt but fierce, clutched the bowl like a shield. "You've seen better days," he said, voice low but firm. Margaret stiffened, reading the challenge in his tone, as if he meant to declare some unspoken truth. They were not done yet. She studied him for a heartbeat longer, then nodded, the smallest trace of a smile touching her cracked lips. The rain fell harder, a drumbeat, against the tin roof above, as if heralding the start of something neither had dared to dream in years. By nightfall, they walked together through alleys slick with muck, passing abandoned warehouses, the echoes of horse-drawn carts, and the faint glow of taverns that promised warmth but no sanctuary. Words were few. Their silence was heavy, charged with possibility and unspoken strategies. They shared no secrets yet, but both recognized a spark, an intelligence honed by hardship, a fury sharpened by injustice. Henry finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "We start with nothing, Margaret, but nothing, if handled right, can become everything." Her eyes gleamed with equal parts fear and determination. At the corner of Hanbury Street, a figure in black vanished into the fog, leaving a folded note pinned to a post. Margaret picked it up, unfolding the fragile paper. The message was simple, yet incendiary. Fortune favors the bold, but only those who burn bridges can rise unscathed. They exchanged a look heavy with understanding. The city's shadows would become their allies, its secrets their weapons. Tonight, the first stone of a reckoning was laid. A scream echoed from a nearby alley, a woman's voice, shrill and pleading, cutting through the fog. Margaret and Henry froze, knowing instinctively that this was no ordinary scream. Someone had dared to challenge them already, and the game had begun. Chapter 2. Smoke and Mirrors. The fog thickened by morning, curling through narrow streets and spilling into the low-lying quarters of East London like liquid smoke. Margaret's hands shook as she lit the kettle, the warmth of the tiny room failing to chase away the chill crawling up her spine. Henry appeared at the doorway, his eyes dark, restless. He carried a small ledger, ragged and water-stained, stolen, or perhaps borrowed, from a merchant's back office the previous evening. "This," he murmured, flipping it open, "is our first map." Numbers scrawled in a chaotic hand traced debts owed, hidden stores of goods, and the gaps where unscrupulous men had exploited widows and laborers alike. Their eyes met. Margaret's heartbeat surged, an echo of the same fiery resolve she had felt on Hanbury Street. They did not speak of morality. London's laws had abandoned them long ago. Their pursuit was singular, wealth and the exacting revenge owed to those who had crushed their youth. Every page of the ledger was a thread, every shadow a passageway to opportunity. Margaret traced one entry with a trembling finger. Mr. Caldwell, pawn shop, Bishopsgate, cheats the widowed, pockets emptied, promises broken. "Begin there," she whispered. Henry nodded, and by mid-afternoon they were threading through crowded markets, their presence unnoticed amidst the chaos of merchants shouting and children begging. Margaret's keen eyes noted a glint beneath a stack of cloth, a misplaced key, likely dropped by someone eager to hide ill-gotten coins. Henry pocketed it, the weight of it a promise in his palm. By twilight they had orchestrated their first act, a swap of inventories at a small warehouse on the docks. What should have been a chaotic, desperate task unfolded with uncanny precision. Margaret guided workers with the authority of someone 50 years younger. Henry managed timing and route, calculating angles and exits like a general plotting a siege. The night air reeked of tar and brine as they slipped away undetected, leaving confusion and outrage in their wake. Yet even as triumph surged, an unseen eye watched them. A tall man in a bowler, features obscured by shadow, lingered at the corner. He noted every gesture, every whispered instruction. This was no coincidence. Their actions had drawn attention beyond the alleyways of East London to someone far more dangerous. Margaret returned to their rented room, face pale but triumphant. "We have begun," she said, placing the ledger on the table. Her hands hovered above it, as though she feared disturbing fate itself. Henry simply nodded. Victory was sweet, but fragile. A knock rattled the door, slow, deliberate. Margaret's pulse raced. Henry motioned to silence her. Another knock, harder this time. The fog outside pressed against the window like fingers. When they opened the door, a folded note lay on the threshold, sealed in black wax. Margaret broke the seal. Her eyes scanned the words. "The city notices those who rise from the ashes. Watch the shadows closely, for one is already within." Henry's jaw tightened. The game was no longer theirs alone. Some enemy, older, more cunning, had already marked them. The candle flickered, casting long, ominous shadows across the room, and the hunt had begun.
Before we continue with the unspeakable secrets, only the bravest should hit subscribe. Are you ready to face the darkest chapters of history? Join us now and prove your courage.
Chapter 3. The Ledger's Secrets. The following morning, a pall of fog hung over Bishopsgate, muted and oppressive, as if London itself were holding its breath. Margaret and Henry moved cautiously, their figures shadowed by the mists curling between warehouses and iron street lamps. The ledger lay open on the table, its cryptic scrawls and margins now transformed into a blueprint of opportunity and danger. Every entry was a potential trap, every name a thread to pull. Margaret's gaze lingered on one particularly defiant merchant, Eustace Hargrove, importer, Cheapside, known for clandestine dealings in stolen silverware. He had eluded authorities for decades, yet now he was within their reach. Henry's hand rested on hers briefly, a silent pact. They would take what was owed and make him pay, not merely in gold, but in reckoning. Their first move required patience. Henry visited the bustling docks, mingling with laborers, noting the routines of men and wagons, memorizing the time shipments arrived and departed. Margaret, meanwhile, infiltrated the markets under the guise of a seamstress, her sharp eyes catching whispered transactions and furtive glances. By evening, she returned with a small, leather-bound notebook stolen from an apprentice accountant, a list of debts, names, and the secret routes of Hargrove's shipments. Together, they plotted in their dim room, candlelight casting long, flickering shadows across maps and ledgers. Margaret's voice trembled with a mix of excitement and cold resolve. "We strike at the warehouse on Fleet Street. He trusts no one. Guards will be minimal. Tonight, we make him see fear." Henry's lips pressed into a thin line. "We cannot fail. One mistake, and everything is lost." Their plan unfolded like clockwork. Enter under cover of night, swap crates, replace silver with lead, and leave evidence suggesting a rival gang, the city Thrummen, and below, unaware of the storm approaching. By midnight, they moved through the fog-shrouded streets, carrying tools hidden beneath their coats, hearts thundering. The warehouse loomed like a blackened monolith, silent and foreboding. Margaret picked the lock with deft fingers, a skill honed during decades of surviving poverty and betrayal. Henry guided the crates inside, careful to avoid the creaking floorboards. Every sense screamed caution. The swap took hours, painstaking precision guiding every motion. The lead-filled crates weighed more than expected, straining muscles and patience alike. Yet as the final crate slid into place and the last lock clicked into the proper sequence, a distant cough echoed, a sound not entirely human but deliberate, waiting. They froze. Margaret's pulse leapt. "Someone is here," she whispered, voice hoarse. Henry's eyes scanned the shadows, searching for movement. Nothing. Then the unmistakable sound of leather boots against timber, deliberate and methodical. Before they could react, the shadows shifted, coalescing into a tall figure framed by the moonlight. A hand rose, pointing toward them. Henry and Margaret's hearts sank. This was no ordinary witness, no startled dockhand. The man's presence radiated a cold, unyielding intelligence, a predator marking prey. Margaret swallowed, mouth dry. "We've been seen," she whispered. The stranger's voice cut through the night, smooth, calm, and terrifying. "So, this is how the phoenix rises from the ashes." Henry's jaw tightened. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Someone had anticipated their move, and the game had grown infinitely more dangerous. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Fog. The stranger's figure remained framed in the dim moonlight, tall and unyielding, as Margaret and Henry froze on the worn wooden floor of Hargrove's warehouse. The air smelled of tar, lead, and damp timber, mixing with the sharp tang of fear. The man's eyes glimmered beneath a wide-brimmed hat, every movement deliberate, measured. He did not approach, yet his presence pressed upon them like a vice. Henry's mind raced. The ledger, the swap, every detail of their plan had been anticipated. Who could have known? They had left no trace, avoided witnesses, relied on shadows. But this man was no mere observer. Margaret's hand trembled, instinctively clutching Henry's arm. She felt a surge of adrenaline, and behind it a deep, burning anger. How dare someone challenge them at the outset? "I know what you're planning," the man said, his voice smooth but edged with malice, "and I will see it undone." Each word was a knife, precise and calculated. Margaret's teeth clenched. Henry's knuckles whitened. Neither spoke, calculating the risk, measuring the odds. Suddenly, the stranger stepped back, melting into the fog outside. The night swallowed him whole, leaving only a faint echo of footsteps and a folded scrap of paper pinned under a crate. Margaret retrieved it with shaking fingers. The message was brief, cryptic. Fortune is not earned by caution alone. Boldness or death decides all. Henry's gaze met hers, a silent acknowledgment. This was no ordinary adversary. They had awakened a predator. The ledger, once a roadmap to fortune, now felt like a beacon, drawing attention they could not ignore. Their choices had consequences, immediate and lethal. They retreated to their rented room, hearts pounding, minds whirling. Margaret laid the ledger on the table, spreading out maps and notes. "We must rethink everything," she said, voice low but firm. "If someone knows our moves, then every step is a risk." Henry nodded, eyes dark. The fire that had propelled them before now burned with an added intensity, rage and the thirst for vengeance. The next days were a blur of observation, careful reconnaissance, and whispered planning. They watched Hargrove's movements from shadows, noting the arrival of goods, the comings and goings of men in the night, every routine. Margaret's sharp eyes caught discrepancies, a delivery that never arrived, a guard who lingered too long near a particular dock. Henry charted patterns meticulously, cross-referencing with the ledger. By the fifth night, they struck again, smaller and more precise. A shipment of textiles meant for Hargrove vanished without trace, replaced by carefully substituted goods. No one saw them, yet the feeling of being hunted persisted. Every alleyway, every fog-drenched street seemed to conceal eyes, waiting. Late one evening, as they returned to their room, a scream pierced the fog, shattering the night's fragile calm. They ran toward the sound, finding a narrow alley where a man lay sprawled, a dagger at his back. Beside him, a note pinned with a rusted nail read, "Do not think the shadows are yours alone." Margaret's chest heaved. Henry's teeth ground in fury. Someone was sending a message. They were no longer invisible. Their rise, carefully plotted, had provoked a silent war. And somewhere in the fog, a figure watched, smiling at the chaos they had unleashed. The game had become deadly serious. Chapter 5. The Whispering Alley. The alley remained silent after the scream, save for the drip of rainwater from eaves onto cobblestones, each drop like a heartbeat echoing in the void. Margaret knelt beside the wounded man, examining the shallow dagger wound. Blood mingled with mud, a dark, accusing smear. "He won't survive long without aid," she whispered. Henry scanned the alley, eyes darting to shadows that might conceal the observer still watching them. The man groaned, lifting a trembling hand to reveal a folded note clenched in his palm. Margaret pried it free. The words were written in jagged, hurried script. "Stop before you rise higher. The city has long memories, and so do I." Henry's jaw tightened. Whoever they were, they had studied them, anticipated them, and now marked them with terror as much as warning. Margaret rose, brushing mud from her coat. "We cannot stop," she said, voice low but resolute. "We've begun, Henry. Retreat is death disguised as mercy." Her words carried a burning conviction that flared inside both of them. Henry nodded, though a cold dread ran down his spine. They had imagined adversaries before, but now one was tangible, stalking them with cunning precision. Back in their room, the ledger sprawled across the table like a map of war. Every name, every shipment, every hidden cache could be a trap or a weapon. Margaret traced her finger along the margins where numbers indicated debts, moving with careful deliberation. "Hargrove is the key," she said finally. "We take him first, and the others will scatter. Fear will work in our favor if we wield it wisely." Henry frowned, leaning over the candlelight. "But someone is already playing the same game. They are steps ahead, leaving warnings, setting snares. We cannot act recklessly." His hands hovered above the ledger, hesitant, calculating. Margaret's gaze hardened. "Reckless is a luxury for the young. We have lived too long in shadows to fear them now." That night the fog deepened, swallowing the streets of Cheapside. Margaret and Henry moved silently, avoiding lanterns and patrols. The warehouse where Hargrove stored silver gleamed faintly in the mist, guarded by men whose ignorance of fear made them predictable. Every step was choreographed, every glance measured. Inside, Margaret guided Henry through crates and dark corners. Her hand found a small hidden compartment in the floorboards, revealing a cache of coins, jewelry, and papers detailing Hargrove's illicit dealings. Their triumph, however, was short-lived. From the shadows, a cough, soft, deliberate, froze them mid-motion. Henry's head snapped toward the sound. A figure stepped into the faint glow of lantern light, a silhouette tall and menacing. The stranger's hat cast a shadow over his face, but the glint in his eyes was unmistakable. Intelligence, malice, and intent. Margaret's heart raced, a cold fury igniting inside her chest. "You think you can rise unnoticed," the man said, voice smooth yet razor-sharp. "London has waited for your reckoning, but I am the one who decides when it begins." Margaret's hand clenched around the dagger she always carried. Henry at her side, every instinct alert. They were no longer merely survivors. The city had become a chessboard, and this figure, unknown, omnipresent, was already 3 moves ahead. Outside, the fog shifted, concealing the approach of more than one shadow, and in that moment Margaret understood the truth. Their war had begun, and death was already circling closer than they dared imagine. Chapter 6. The Game of Eyes. The stranger lingered in the doorway, shadowed by the dim glow of a lantern, his presence pressing like the weight of a storm. Margaret tightened her grip on the dagger, the leather-wrapped handle slick with her nervous sweat. Henry's hand hovered near the hidden compartment, ready to defend, to strike if necessary. Neither moved, measuring the predator before them. "You have ambition," the man said, voice low and deliberate. "But ambition alone will not carry you through London's veins. Every move you make has already been anticipated." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Her fury surged, not just at being watched, but at the audacity of a stranger claiming dominion over their plans. Henry stepped forward, voice even but firm. "Then you'll find we are not so easily outmaneuvered." The stranger's gaze flicked to the ledger, now resting openly on the table. Margaret felt a shiver. That ledger, a symbol of their rising power, was now a beacon of vulnerability. A sudden rustle behind the stranger drew their eyes. A shadow detached from the corner. A boy, perhaps 15, eyes wide and fearful, clutching a folded scrap of paper. He handed it to the stranger, who opened it briefly and nodded once, sharply, before the boy vanished into the fog. Margaret and Henry exchanged a glance. This adversary was no lone hunter. He had eyes everywhere. The stranger's attention returned to them. "You must understand. Every alley, every warehouse, every shipment is already known to me. London whispers its secrets to those who listen, and I have listened long." He stepped closer, the floorboards creaking beneath polished boots. Margaret's pulse hammered. Henry, calculating, realized they were at a crossroads. They could flee, but the ledger, the plan, their very survival depended on moving forward. He leaned close to Margaret. "We cannot hesitate. We cannot let him dictate the terms. We must act, or the city will consume us before we even rise." She nodded, fury replacing fear, her eyes burning with the same raw, relentless resolve that had driven her through decades of loss. The stranger's lips curled in a faint, mocking smile. "Then we shall see who controls the shadows. One misstep, and your fortunes and your lives will be forfeit." Without another word, he vanished into the fog, leaving behind the faint scent of tobacco and wet stone. Margaret sank into a chair, heart racing, as Henry scanned the ledger. The hidden compartments, the secret paths of shipments, the misappropriated silver, they were all vulnerable now. Whoever this stranger was, he knew their every pattern, every subtle weakness. Yet, in the very recognition of that knowledge, they found clarity. Their moves could no longer be timid. Hesitation would be fatal. By dawn, Margaret and Henry were back on the streets, eyes sharp, bodies tense. They moved like ghosts through the alleys of Whitechapel and Cheapside, noting every shadow, every flicker of movement. The city itself felt alive, a labyrinth of danger and opportunity. Henry paused at the corner of Hanbury Street, watching the fog twist like fingers around the gas lamps. "We are being hunted," he said, voice low, grim. "But the hunter has exposed himself, and every hunter leaves a mark eventually." Margaret's lips pressed together in silent agreement. The game had changed, and now London itself would bear witness to the reckoning. And somewhere in the twisting alleys, the stranger watched, a predator poised, knowing the true hunt was only beginning.
Disclaimer: this story is completely fictional. Any resemblance to actual people, places, or events is purely coincidental.
Chapter 7: The Masked Messenger. The following evening, London seemed to shrink under a thick veil of fog. Gas lamps sputtered weakly, casting elongated shadows across slick cobblestones. Margaret and Henry moved with deliberate caution, their senses alert to every whisper, every shuffle of boots, every flicker of movement in the alleys. Their hunter was out there, watching, waiting, and now the city itself had become a labyrinth of terror. A sudden knock at the door of their rented room froze them in place. Margaret glanced at Henry, eyes wide, instinct sharpening. "No one should know we are here," she whispered. The knock came again, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Henry crossed the room in 3 long strides and cracked the door open to reveal a figure dressed entirely in black, face obscured beneath a scarf and wide-brimmed hat. The stranger did not speak, but extended a small folded note on a silver tray. Margaret stepped forward, snatched it, and opened the paper. The message was brief. "The path to fortune is littered with masks. Trust none, not even those who share your fire." Beneath the warning was a symbol, a blackened circle drawn with careful precision. Henry frowned, tracing the mark with a finger. It was unfamiliar, yet it radiated menace. Margaret's hands trembled slightly. "A warning, or a challenge?" she murmured. Henry's jaw tightened. "Both," he replied, "and I suspect whoever sent this is closer than we realize." The masked messenger retreated without a word, disappearing into the fog. Margaret and Henry followed after a pause, eyes scanning every shadow. They caught no glimpse, no sign of pursuit. Yet the message lingered like poison. Someone had infiltrated their world with unnerving precision. By midnight, they were back at Fleet Street, the warehouse of Eustace Hargrove looming like a blackened fortress. The earlier theft had emboldened them, but now they knew subtlety alone was insufficient. They moved with precision, born of decades surviving hardship, slipping inside without a sound. Margaret guided Henry through hidden passages, past stacks of crates and timber, and into the inner storeroom where Hargrove's silver lay stacked and glinting in the dim light. Margaret's eyes caught a shadow in the corner. She signaled Henry, and together they approached, knives in hand. But it was only a cat, startled by the intrusion. Relief mixed with adrenaline, but their awareness had sharpened. Nothing could be overlooked. They worked swiftly, replacing silver with weighted lead replicas, noting every detail in the ledger for future leverage. Each crate moved was a gamble, each sound a potential signal to an observer lurking in the fog. The city seemed to pulse with hidden eyes, every alleyway a theater of tension. Just as they finished the swap, a faint tapping echoed across the timber floor. Margaret froze, heart racing. Henry crouched low, listening. The tapping grew louder, rhythmic, deliberate, almost like a heartbeat. Margaret whispered, "We are not alone." From the shadows, a figure emerged. Not the masked messenger, but someone entirely new. A man in a gray coat with eyes like black ice. He held a letter in one hand, and in the other a pistol glinted under the flickering gaslight. Margaret's breath caught. Henry's grip tightened. "You've been watched," the man said, voice sharp as a blade. "And now the city demands a reckoning." The fog closed around them like a shroud. Chapter 8. The Gray Coat. Margaret's fingers curled tightly around the dagger's handle, knuckles white, as Henry's eyes never left the man in the gray coat. His presence radiated authority and danger, the kind of cold intelligence honed by decades in shadows London had long forgotten. Every step he took was deliberate, measured, as if he were both judge and executioner. "You move too boldly," he said, voice low and precise, each word a weight pressing into their chests. "Fortune is never claimed without consequence. You think you can rise from nothing, and the city will bow? You underestimate the currents beneath its streets." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. She felt a fury igniting, burning, raw, unforgiving. At 60, she had endured betrayal, poverty, and loss. Now she would endure no challenge to her resolve. Henry shifted, voice calm but laced with steel. "We do not underestimate. We simply act where others hesitate." The gray-coated man's eyes glimmered with a faint smile, sharp and dangerous. "Boldness," he said, "can be a blade that cuts both ways." With a sudden flick, he tossed the letter at their feet. Margaret bent, picking it up. The words were short, deliberate. "One wrong step, and everything you have built will burn. Watch the shadows closely. They do not forgive." Before they could react, the man turned, moving toward the alley's fog-shrouded exit. Margaret and Henry exchanged a glance. Their adversary had spoken, threatened, and retreated, leaving the city's mist to cloak his presence. It was a warning, yes, but also an invitation. Whoever this man was, he was challenging them, daring them to prove their cunning. By dawn, the streets of Whitechapel seemed different, sharper, alive with the unseen currents of danger. Margaret and Henry moved with heightened awareness, eyes darting to every flicker in the fog, ears straining for the faintest sound of pursuit. The city itself had become a chessboard, each alley a potential trap, every passer-by a possible informant. They returned to their ledger, each entry now more crucial than ever. Hargrove's shipments, the hidden caches, the unpaid debts, every detail had to be precise. Margaret traced a route with her finger, plotting the next move. "We cannot act without certainty," she whispered. "Every step from here is under observation. We need information, clear, actionable intelligence, or we die chasing shadows." Henry nodded, eyes scanning the notes. "Then we create a trap, not for the city, but for the hunter who stalks us. Let him believe he controls the game. Let him think he dictates our moves." Margaret's heart raced at the idea. At last, the fury, the hatred, and the cleverness of decades could be turned into a weapon, not only to survive, but to dominate. As night fell, they prepared for their most daring act yet. Crates were loaded, secret compartments double-checked, and disguises readied. The fog thickened outside, curling through streets like spectral fingers. Every nerve burned, every sense heightened. They had been hunted, threatened, and mocked, and now it was their turn to strike. And in the twisting alleys beyond, the figure in the gray coat waited, watching, knowing that the coming hours would determine not only fortune, but survival. Margaret's pulse quickened. Henry's jaw tightened. Tonight, the first trap would be sprung. Chapter 9. The trap is set. The fog had thickened to an almost tangible weight, curling around the narrow streets like a living thing. Margaret adjusted her shawl and signaled Henry to follow silently. Their eyes flicked to every shadow, every lantern flicker, every figure that moved too quickly or too deliberately. Tonight, they were no longer the hunted. They were the hunters, and the trap had been meticulously laid. The target was subtle, yet unmistakable. The gray-coated man who had stalked, warned, and taunted them. Every clue they had gathered, footsteps, scraps of paper, whispered sightings, led to a small warehouse near the Thames, abandoned save for the faint scent of tar and decay. Margaret's pulse quickened as they approached, knowing that one wrong step could spell death. Henry paused at the corner, listening to the rhythm of the fog-shrouded night. "Remember," he murmured, voice low but firm. "He expects boldness, but boldness must be tempered with patience." Margaret nodded, every nerve taut. At 60, she had endured betrayals that would have crushed lesser spirits. Now they moved with the precision of those who had nothing to lose and everything to gain. They entered through a side door carefully pried open, slipping inside like shadows themselves. Crates and barrels formed a maze of silent obstacles. Margaret's eyes scanned every corner. Henry's hand hovered over the ledger, ready to note every irregularity. Their plan was simple in theory. Lure the gray-coated man into believing they were vulnerable, watch him reveal his methods, then strike. Hours passed in silence, punctuated only by the occasional drip of water from the rafters. Margaret crouched behind a stack of crates, listening intently. Henry's hand rested on a concealed dagger, mind calculating distances, angles, escape routes. Then a soft sound, a deliberate shuffle, a breath held too long, signaled the approach of their quarry. The gray-coated man entered, moving with the same deliberate grace Margaret and Henry had observed before. He paused, scanning the room, eyes sharp and calculating. Margaret's heart pounded. Every instinct screamed caution. This was the culmination of weeks of strategy, observation, and risk. Henry whispered, "Wait for the signal. Patience." Margaret nodded, barely breathing. The man circled, stepping closer to the carefully arranged crates, unaware of the hidden spaces beneath their feet. A faint metallic click echoed through the warehouse. The trap was sprung. A series of false leads, subtle noises, and the careful placement of their own belongings to suggest vulnerability. The gray-coated man froze, eyes narrowing. Margaret saw it, a flicker of hesitation, the first real sign of doubt she had observed in him. Henry's hand tightened around the dagger. The predator had become prey, even if only for a heartbeat. Suddenly, a second shadow emerged from the far corner, a figure neither Margaret nor Henry had anticipated. Their pulse surged. The room now held three presences, all calculating, all dangerous. The fog of deception had thickened beyond expectation. Margaret's voice cut the silence, low but venomous. "We are no longer the hunted." The gray-coated man's eyes met hers, cold and calculating. "Then we shall see," he whispered, stepping forward. A sudden crash from the far wall. A crate toppled, spilling coins and silver, echoed through the warehouse. Henry lunged, dagger ready, Margaret at his side. And in that instant, the trap, the hunter, and the prey collided in a deadly, invisible dance where only cunning, ruthlessness, and resolve would determine survival.
Did you know? In the late Victorian era, Whitechapel in East London was one of the poorest and most crowded districts in Britain. Thousands lived crammed into 233 common lodging houses, where up to 8,500 people slept nightly in extremely cramped, unhygienic conditions. The area was notorious for dire poverty, poor sanitation, disease, and crime. Conditions so terrible that social researchers of the time documented entire families sharing tiny single-room quarters and battling outbreaks of typhus, cholera, and tuberculosis. This bleak environment forced many women into prostitution, and crime became a daily struggle for survival, not merely an exception.
Chapter 10. Collision in the Shadows. The crash of the fallen crate reverberated like a gunshot through the warehouse, throwing shadows into chaotic motion. Margaret's dagger gleamed in the faint lamplight, Henry's hand gripping a sturdy iron rod. The gray-coated man froze for a fraction of a heartbeat, calculating, analyzing, then lunged with precision, moving faster than the flickering gas lamps could illuminate. Margaret sidestepped, swinging her dagger in a wide arc. The man ducked, the steel slicing only the air, and the sound of metal scraping timber echoed like a scream. Henry struck forward with the rod, connecting with a crate, sending a shower of coins scattering across the floor. Every sound seemed amplified, every movement measured by instinct, honed over decades of survival. They danced around each other, predator and prey blurred into a deadly triad. Then the second shadow revealed itself fully, a young man, eyes wild, holding a pistol that trembled in the dim light. Margaret froze for a heartbeat. Henry's jaw clenched. Their carefully constructed trap had spiraled into chaos. "You shouldn't have come," Margaret hissed at the gray-coated man. "This is our game, not yours." The man's lips curled in a faint, cold smile. "I've played longer than you can imagine," he said. "And patience always wins." His eyes flicked toward the second figure, who fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Splinters rained down, and the noise sent a flock of pigeons screeching into the fog beyond the open door. Margaret lunged, dagger aimed for the younger man, but Henry intercepted, knocking the pistol aside with a swift kick. Coins and silver clattered underfoot, creating a treacherous battlefield. The gray-coated man took advantage, slipping past them to a stack of crates at the far end, vanishing momentarily. Margaret's breath came in shallow gasps. At 60 she had survived the death of family, poverty, and betrayal. But the intensity of this confrontation threatened to break every reserve of courage she possessed. Henry's eyes met hers, wide and calculating. "We must end this now," he said. "If we hesitate, one of us dies, or both." Margaret nodded, heart pounding. They moved as one, silent and precise. Each step was measured, each strike deliberate. Suddenly, the gray-coated man reappeared from behind the crates, dagger poised, eyes cold. Margaret feinted left, drawing him toward her, while Henry came from the opposite side, rod swinging with devastating force. The man blocked Henry's blow, spinning to face Margaret, and in that instant a small hidden latch beneath the crates clicked. Coins spilled again, masking the sound of movement beneath the floorboards. Margaret froze as a concealed compartment opened, a route they had prepared as escape or trap. The young man's eyes widened as the gray-coated figure stumbled backward, caught off guard by the sudden opening. "Now!" Henry shouted. They pressed the advantage, pushing the man toward the concealed space, forcing him into a moment of vulnerability he had not anticipated. The warehouse seemed to hold its breath. Only one thing was certain. Tonight, the balance of power was about to shift. And when the dust settled, someone would emerge victorious, or not at all. Chapter 11. Into the Hidden Vault. The concealed compartment yawned beneath the crates like a mouth of shadow, swallowing the gray-coated man's momentum. Margaret's dagger remained poised, every nerve alert, as Henry pressed forward, rod raised. The younger man stumbled back, eyes wide with fear and indecision. In that heartbeat, the warehouse seemed to shrink, the fog outside pressing like a living thing, curling through the broken windows and warped floorboards. The gray-coated figure fell into the hidden vault below with a muted grunt, scrambling to regain balance in the cramped darkness. Coins rattled underfoot as he landed, the faint glow of a lantern from above casting his shadow like a distorted specter against the walls. Margaret and Henry leaned cautiously over the edge, peering into the void. He was trapped, but only temporarily. The vault was narrow, dimly lit, and filled with crates and barrels concealing unknown treasures. "You underestimated us," Margaret spat, her voice echoing down the shaft. "We are no longer your prey." Henry's rod clinked against timber, a subtle warning that escape would be difficult. Yet the gray-coated man's eyes glimmered with unbroken cunning. Even in confinement, he radiated control, patience, and menace. From the shadows, the young man in gray shifted uneasily, pistol still trembling in his hands. Margaret's eyes locked on him. "And what of you?" she demanded. "Are you his ally, or merely a fool drawn into a deadly game?" The boy swallowed hard, gaze darting to the man below. I was sent to warn him," he admitted, voice barely audible over the dripping water. "But I didn't know what I'd find." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Henry's eyes narrowed. Even allies could be dangerous, especially those untested in the crucible of survival. She made a quick decision. You follow instructions carefully, or you die. The is no middle ground in this city tonight. The boy nodded, fear mingling with a flicker of resolve, and edged closer. Below, the gray-coated man assessed his confinement, noting the crates forming obstacles and the narrow exit blocked by Margaret and Henry's strategic positioning. He circled, searching for leverage, a flaw, any weakness. His lips curved in a faint, unreadable smile. He was trapped, but a trapped predator is never truly powerless. Margaret's mind raced. Weeks of preparation, countless nights tracking shipments, and every move calculated to exact revenge and claim fortune. None of it could falter now. Every step, every glance, every sound could tip the balance. Her fury, honed over decades of loss, surged, coiling like a spring ready to unleash destruction. Henry's whisper cut through the tension. "We hold the advantage, but we cannot falter. One misstep, and all is lost." Margaret nodded, dagger glinting faintly in the lantern light. From the depths of the vault came a soft scraping sound, deliberate and controlled. The gray-coated man was not merely surviving. He was plotting, calculating, waiting for the precise instant to turn captivity into opportunity. Margaret's pulse raced, every heartbeat echoing in her ears. Henry shifted beside her. The game was no longer merely survival or revenge. It was war. And the first move beneath the shadows of London streets would decide who lived and who perished in the darkness. Chapter 12. The Vault's Whisper. The vault beneath Fleet Street smelled of damp wood, iron, and decay. Every breath Margaret and Henry drew laced with tension. From above, the lanterns cast uncertain light into the narrow chamber, illuminating crates stacked like silent sentinels. The gray-coated man crouched in the shadows, eyes sharp and calculating, his hands brushing over the coins and papers that littered the floor. Every object was a potential weapon, a potential tool, a potential trap. Margaret's pulse hammered. At 60, she had endured the death of family, betrayal by friends, and the cold indifference of the city. But the raw hatred burning inside her now was different. It was a living thing, feeding on fear, feeding on revenge, demanding precision and ruthlessness. "We cannot let him turn this on us," she whispered to Henry. His jaw tightened. "He is dangerous," he replied, "but every predator leaves a mark. We must find it." Above, the young man shuffled nervously, pistol still clutched in trembling hands. Margaret's eyes met his, sharp and unyielding. "Do exactly as I say. Hesitate, and you will die. Move, and you will survive." He nodded, swallowing hard, stepping closer to their vantage point. Every nerve in Margaret's body screamed caution, but the fire inside demanded action. Below, the gray-coated man had discovered a small, loose plank along the vault floor. He tested it subtly, listening to the muffled sounds above. Margaret and Henry's plan relied on him remaining trapped, but instinct told him a clever mind would find leverage. His lips curved in a faint, cold smile. He had not survived decades by remaining cornered. Margaret signaled to Henry. They would bait him, force him to make the first move. Carefully she dropped a coin near the plank's edge. The sound echoed in the vault, deliberate, controlled. The gray-coated man's eyes flicked to eye, narrowing. He circled slowly, assessing the angle, the possibility, the trap. Henry's rod shifted slightly, the movement subtle but threatening. Suddenly, a whisper reached their ears from below. "You think you control the game?" The words carried menace, chilling and precise. Margaret's hands tightened around her dagger. "He is taunting us," she hissed. "Do not respond. Let him expose himself." The gray-coated man's next movement was swift. He pressed the loose plank, and it gave way slightly, revealing a hidden channel beneath the vault floor. Margaret's heart leapt. He had found an escape route, or a way to turn the tables entirely. Henry whispered, voice taut. "He knows more than we thought. Every advantage we believed we held, it may be compromised." Margaret's eyes blazed with fury. "Then we act, now." They moved as one, silent and lethal, eyes locked on the faint flicker of motion beneath the loose plank. The young man above flinched but obeyed, stepping aside to give Margaret and Henry clear sight. The vault seemed to shrink, shadows twisting, every breath and heartbeat magnified. The gray-coated man paused, fully aware he was watched, calculating his next move with surgical precision. Margaret's dagger glinted, Henry's rod raised. They were ready, and in that moment the darkness whispered promises of violence, betrayal, and vengeance. London itself seemed to hold its breath, knowing that when the first strike fell, it would echo through the alleys and fog, unstoppable and merciless. The war beneath the streets had begun. Chapter 13. The Vault's Betrayal. The gray-coated man paused beneath the loose plank, eyes glinting in the dim lantern light, his mind a maelstrom of calculation. Every instinct screamed that he was at a disadvantage, yet cunning and decades of survival gave him patience. He could feel the weight of Margaret and Henry above, the tension pressing like iron, every movement deliberate, every breath audible. Margaret's dagger remained poised, every muscle taut, every nerve alight with the fire of decades of hatred. She had survived poverty, betrayal, and loss, and now she faced a predator who had stalked her and Henry with almost supernatural precision. Henry's grip on the iron rod was equally steady, his mind calculating angles, exits, and contingencies. Every element of the trap hinged on the man acting predictably, yet instinct warned them he might not. A soft shuffle betrayed the young man's presence above, his fear palpable. Margaret flicked a glance at him. "Step back," she whispered, voice firm. "Do not interfere unless I command it." The boy nodded, swallowing hard, his hands trembling slightly over the pistol. Below, the gray-coated figure's hands pressed along the edges of the plank, probing the hidden channel. He murmured under his breath, almost a chant of calculation. Every creak, every minuscule sound was registered. He could see only faint shadows from above, yet he knew the hunters were watching, anticipating his moves. Suddenly, the plank shifted beneath him, sending him stumbling slightly. Margaret's dagger swung in a blur, aimed for his exposed hand. He twisted, narrowly avoiding the strike, but in that moment a second unseen mechanism triggered, one Henry had placed as a contingency. A series of hidden weights fell from the upper crates, clattering onto the vault floor, disorienting the man and scattering coins like a storm. Margaret lunged, aimed with precise fury, while Henry pressed the advantage with the rod, forcing the gray-coated man toward the corner of the vault where the channel had opened. The man snarled, a sound full of rage and disbelief, realizing the trap was more intricate than he had anticipated. Then came the betrayal. A small hand, trembling but deliberate, reached into the vault from above. The young man had moved without permission, nudging a crate that sent the gray-coated figure sprawling further into a corner. Margaret's eyes widened, fury mixing with the undeniable truth. Allies could be as dangerous as enemies. Henry shouted, "Step back, now!" The boy froze, eyes wide with fear. Margaret struck, dagger slicing the air, and Henry followed, forcing the man into the narrow channel. Coins and silver scattered, glinting ominously in the lantern light, reflecting their fury and desperation. The gray-coated man pressed himself against the channel wall, trapped yet still defiant. His eyes met Margaret's, cold and calculating, burning with the promise of vengeance. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You've won a battle, not the war. I will rise again, and you will wish for the shadows to reclaim you." Margaret's breath came in sharp bursts, body taut with adrenaline. Henry's jaw tightened, rod resting across his shoulder. They had gained the advantage, but the city itself seemed to hum with foreboding. Outside, the fog swirled around the warehouse like a living shroud, carrying whispers of London's unseen watchers. The first victory had been claimed, but the war, the true war, was only beginning. Chapter 14. The Shadows Return. The gray-coated man's words echoed through the vault long after he had been forced into the narrow channel. Margaret's hands shook slightly, adrenaline still pulsing through her veins. Henry's jaw remained tight, eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of a counterattack. Victory had been claimed, yes, but the threat had not vanished. Every instinct told them he would return, smarter, faster, more ruthless than before. Margaret replaced the loose plank, every movement deliberate, as if sealing away not only the man, but the tension of weeks spent planning and hunting. Henry moved coins and scattered silver back into neat piles, ensuring nothing betrayed their presence. The young boy above watched silently, wide-eyed and pale, realizing too late the magnitude of the night's events. Margaret's voice cut through the quiet. "You will follow our instructions, without hesitation. One misstep, and you die along with him." The boy nodded, fear mingling with the faintest spark of resolve. By dawn, London had swallowed the fog, revealing streets slick with rain and littered with the detritus of the night. Margaret and Henry moved through Whitechapel, shadowing familiar routes, always alert. Their adversary had been contained, but the ledger, the hidden shipments, and every secret path remained vulnerable. They needed intelligence, not just brute force. Hours later, a letter arrived at their rented room, slipped under the door with surgical precision. Margaret picked it up, noting the thick, unmarked seal. Henry leaned in. "He's speaking to us now, not through shadows, but directly," he said. Margaret's eyes narrowed as she broke the seal, unfolding the crisp paper. The words were simple, calculated, and chilling, impressive. "You have survived, for now. But London remembers its debts, and so do I. You will see me again, stronger, wiser, and relentless. Consider tonight a lesson in patience. Beneath the text, a small sketch. The outline of the vault beneath Fleet Street, drawn with uncanny precision." Margaret's hand clenched the letter. "He knows everything," she whispered. Henry's jaw tightened. "Then we learn from it. We anticipate. We strike where he least expects." Their fury and determination coiled tighter than ever. That evening they returned to Fleet Street, not to confront the gray-coated man, but to consolidate their advantage. Crates of silver and documents were removed, hidden along new routes that only they could navigate. Every street, alley, and warehouse became part of a labyrinth of misdirection. Margaret traced the ledger with meticulous fingers, noting discrepancies in shipments and accounts, crafting a network designed to bait and mislead. As night fell, the fog returned, thick and suffocating. Margaret and Henry paused at the corner of Hanbury Street, where shadows gathered like spectators. Every instinct screamed that their enemy had not vanished. He was out there, watching, waiting, learning. Margaret's hands curled into fists. "We cannot hide," she said, voice low, fierce. "We must anticipate him. Strike first, strike true." Henry nodded, eyes glinting. "The war has only just begun, and soon London will burn with the reckoning we have planned." Somewhere in the swirling fog, the gray-coated man moved, silent as a phantom, his mind already calculating the next move in a deadly game where only cunning and ruthlessness could ensure survival. And Margaret felt it deep in her bones. The shadows had not forgotten, nor would they forgive. Chapter 15. The Reckoning. The fog lay thick over London, swallowing the streets, curling around gas lamps and alleyways like a living thing. Margaret and Henry moved through the shadows with deadly purpose, hearts hammering, senses sharpened to every creak of timber, every whisper of wind. Tonight, the gray-coated man would either rise or fall, and their decades-long resolve would be tested in a brutal collision of skill, cunning, and hatred. The vault beneath Fleet Street had been reinforced, mapped, and remapped. Every crate, every hidden channel, every false passage had been accounted for. Yet instinct warned Margaret that one misstep could turn the city itself into their tomb. Henry's eyes scanned every corner, rod poised, mind calculating. "Patience," he whispered. "We wait until he forces his hand." Margaret nodded, dagger at the ready, fury coiling like a spring inside her chest. Minutes stretched like hours. The fog pressed in, thick and unyielding, carrying with it the faintest sound, a shuffle, a breath, a whisper of leather against wood. Margaret's pulse leapt. From the shadows emerged the gray-coated man, his hat low, eyes gleaming beneath its brim, every movement calm, deliberate, predatory. He had returned, stronger, more precise, and now the stakes were absolute. "You have been clever," he said, voice low and lethal. "But cleverness alone will not save you from what comes." Margaret's fingers tightened around the dagger. "We are not afraid," she spat, fury sharpening her words. "And we will see this through. Every coin, every secret, every betrayal. You will pay for it all." Henry struck first, swinging the rod with calculated force, forcing the man toward the vault entrance. The gray-coated figure dodged, fluid and precise, eyes flicking to every exit. Margaret lunged from the opposite side, dagger slicing toward him. He twisted, narrowly avoiding the blade, and in that instant a hidden trapdoor beneath his feet snapped open, a calculated misdirection by Margaret and Henry, designed to turn the hunter into prey. The man fell into the chamber below, landing amidst crates and scattered coins. He rose swiftly, calculating, assessing, and for the first time Margaret saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. But uncertainty was fleeting. Instinct and experience were his allies, and he recovered, springing toward a narrow passage with terrifying agility. Henry intercepted, rod connecting with the man's shoulder, forcing him into a corner where the walls of the vault trapped him. Margaret's dagger gleamed in the lantern light as she pressed forward, every nerve alight with decades of suppressed rage, betrayal, and loss. "This ends tonight," she hissed. The gray-coated man laughed softly, a sound full of dark admiration. "So much fire," he said, voice low. "I wondered if you could match the city itself. But every shadow I leave, someone will inherit it, even now." Margaret's jaw tightened. He was testing them, probing their limits, buying time. Henry's rod struck again, precise and unyielding, driving the man back. Margaret lunged, dagger aimed at the heart of the predator who had haunted them, stalked them, and threatened all they had built. And in that moment, the vault seemed to hold its breath, London itself suspended in anticipation of a reckoning decades in the making. The final move was coming. Chapter 16. The Fury of 60 Years. The vault was deathly silent except for the ragged breaths of Margaret, Henry, and the gray-coated man. Coins glittered like stars across the floor, casting fractured light that danced across their faces. Every heartbeat echoed in the chamber, amplified by decades of loss, fury, and relentless hatred that had brought them to this final moment. At 60, Margaret felt a lifetime of injustice coil inside her like a living thing, ready to strike with merciless precision. The gray-coated man circled, cautious, calculating, every movement a measure of survival. Margaret's dagger glimmered in her hand, every tremor of her fingers fueled by fury decades in the making. Henry pressed forward, rod sweeping low, closing the distance. Every plan, every calculation, every night spent in shadows led to this collision of ambition and vengeance. "You thought you could outwit me," the man hissed, voice sharp as broken glass. "London is mine as much as yours. Every step, every shadow, every secret. You cannot escape it." Margaret's eyes blazed. "We did not come this far to flee shadows. We have clawed our way from nothing to power, and you will not take it from us." Her voice cracked with rage, a cry forged in 60 years of endurance and hatred. Henry struck, rod connecting with the man's side. He staggered but recovered, lunging toward a narrow escape passage. Margaret anticipated, dagger slicing through the air, cutting off the path. The gray-coated man faltered, rage flashing in his eyes. Every instinct screamed that escape was impossible, yet cunning demanded a final move. With a sudden, desperate lunge, he grabbed a crate above, tipping it toward them. Coins and timber fell like a miniature avalanche. Margaret twisted, narrowly avoiding crushing debris, while Henry's rod deflected the falling crates. The vault became a maelstrom of metal, waryi tutor, ood, and fury. Margaret lunged again, dagger aimed at the man's heart. He twisted instinctively, but at 60 years old, her resolve and precision, honed by a lifetime of survival, betrayal, and loss, were unstoppable. The blade sank true, finding its mark. The gray-coated man's eyes widened, disbelief and admiration flashing across his face in equal measure. He fell finally, a shadow defeated by decades of hatred, planning, and cunning. Margaret's chest heaved, rod and dagger slick with sweat and triumph. Henry dropped beside her, breathing ragged, eyes scanning the vault for any sign of further threat. There was none. Silence settled, heavy and complete. Margaret sank against a crate, letting decades of fury and fear wash over her. At 60, she had clawed her way from nothing, fought against greed, malice, and relentless pursuit, and now emerged victorious. London's shadows had tested her and Henry, but they had endured. Every calculated step, every ounce of patience, every spark of rage had culminated in this moment. Henry placed a hand on her shoulder. "We did it," he whispered. "We survived the city, the hunter, and ourselves." Margaret's lips curved into a weary, triumphant smile. "And at 60, we began with nothing, and we shocked the world." Beyond the vault, London continued, indifferent to the triumph and bloodshed below. Yet for Margaret and Henry, the city would never be the same. They had carved their vengeance, claimed their power, and proved that even in a world of shadows, a lifetime of fury could forge legends. The fog settled back into the streets, carrying whispers of a reckoning none would forget. And the names of Margaret and Henry, once unknown and underestimated, would echo through the alleys and history alike, proof that fury, patience, and hatred could defy time itself.